After my grandparents died, I inherited $26 million. My parents demanded it when I refused. After the sudden death of her grandparents, Emma Carter inherits $26 million. Instead of celebrating her future, her own parents turn against her, demanding every cent of the fortune. What begins as a family dispute quickly spirals into betrayal, lawsuits, broken relationships, and shocking revelations about why her grandparents chose her alone. The funeral and the will. The sky was gray, the morning of my grandparents' funeral, as if the heavens themselves were mourning their loss. A soft drizzle fell over St. Matthew's Church, tapping against the black umbrellas that lined the cemetery. I stood between rows of family members, the weight of grief pressing on my chest like a stone. My grandmother, Eleanor Carter, and my grandfather, William Carter, had been the center of my world. They weren't just grandparents. They were my mentors, my protectors, the only people who had truly believed in me when the rest of my family dismissed me as the quiet one. Losing them both within weeks of each other felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath my feet. As the priest spoke solemn words over their graves, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and unease. My parents stood a few feet away, my father stiff and emotionless, my mother dabbing her eyes dramatically with a tissue. To anyone else, they looked like grieving children burying their parents, but I knew better. My parents' relationship with my grandparents had been complicated, strained by decades of unspoken resentments and fights about money. The service ended quietly, and people began drifting toward their cars. I stayed back, staring at the polished wood caskets as the rain began to fall harder. My grandfather had always told me, "Emma, when we're gone, remember that storms always pass but strong people don't break." His words echoed inside me now. Later that afternoon, our entire family gathered in the oak-paneled office of Carter and Wells, the law firm that had handled my grandparents' affairs for generations. The room smelled faintly of leather and old books, the shelves lined with dusty volumes of law journals. We sat in heavy chairs around a long mahogany table. My cousins whispered nervously, my uncle checked his watch impatiently, and my parents sat rigid, my mother clutching my father's arm. I had never seen so many Carters in one room before, and yet I felt completely alone. Mr. Davis, my grandparents' attorney for over 30 years, cleared his throat. He was an older man, his silver hair perfectly combed back, glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He unfolded a thick document, placed it on the table, and began reading in a steady, formal voice. "This is the last will and testament of William and Eleanor Carter." My heart pounded. I had never thought much about inheritance. My grandparents were comfortable, yes, but they weren't flashy. Their mansion was old, their cars modest, and they never boasted about wealth. Mr. Davis continued, naming small bequests, a watch collection for my cousin Peter, jewelry pieces for my aunt, family photo albums for others. My parents leaned forward, anticipation buzzing between them. Then Mr. Davis paused, his gaze flicking toward me, and to our beloved granddaughter, Emma Carter. He cleared his throat again. "We leave the remainder of our estate, totaling $26 million, in cash, assets, and property." The room went silent. I froze. $26 million. My ears rang as if someone had set off fireworks inside my skull. The words didn't seem real. That my mother gasped audibly. "What?" My father slammed his hand against the table. "This must be a mistake." But Mr. Davis remained calm. Mr. and Mrs. Carter were very clear in their wishes. They reviewed and signed this will 6 months ago. All eyes turned to me. My cousins looked envious, my uncle's jaw clenched, and my parents' faces twisted into something dark and ugly I had never seen before. "Why her?" my father demanded. "She's just a child." "I'm 23, I whispered, but no one seemed to hear me. Mr. Davis adjusted his glasses. "Your parents believed Emma would honor their legacy with integrity. Their decision is final." My mother leaned across the table, her voice sharp like broken glass. "Emma, tell him you don't want it. Tell him you'll sign it over to us. That money belongs to this family, not just you." My stomach churned. I couldn't even process the reality of inheriting millions, and here they were, demanding it like I owed them. I looked at my father, who had never once attended my college plays, never once told me he was proud of me. His eyes were cold, greedy. I can't do that," I said quietly. The room erupted. My parents shouted, my cousins whispered furiously. My uncle stormed out. Mr. Davis tapped the table firmly, reminding everyone that the will was legally binding. But as I sat there, hands trembling in my lap, I realized something chilling. This inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a curse. A fortune that would expose the ugliest parts of the people. I called family. And this was only the beginning. The first demands that night, after the reading of the will. The silence inside my apartment felt heavier than usual. I sat on the couch, staring at the stack of legal documents Mr. Davis had handed me, pages filled with numbers, properties, stocks, and account details all mine now. It didn't feel real. Just a few days ago, I was worrying about making rent, scraping by with my part-time job at a coffee shop while finishing my graduate degree. And now, $26 million sat in accounts under my name. But instead of relief, I felt dread. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Emma, come home tonight. We need to talk." Her voice was sharper than usual, like it wasn't a request, it was an order. Against my better judgment, I went. The Carter family home was a colonial-style mansion. The house I grew up in but never really belonged to. I stepped into the foyer, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The scent of my mother's lavender candles hung in the air, but it didn't feel comforting, it felt staged. Like everything else about this house, they were waiting for me in the living room. My father sat in his leather chair, arms crossed, while my mother perched on the edge of the sofa, her eyes glittering with something I couldn't name. "Sit," my father ordered. I obeyed, setting my purse beside me. "Emma," my mother began sweetly, "we've been thinking about the will. Of course, your grandparents loved you, but surely you understand that money wasn't meant for you to keep." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "That inheritance belongs to the family," she said. "To us, to your father and me. You're too young to handle that kind of responsibility." My father leaned forward. "Sign it over. Transfer the accounts into my name. I'll manage everything. You'll have what you need." The words cut like a knife. They weren't asking, they were demanding. I shook my head slowly. "Grandma and Grandpa wanted me to have it. Mr. Davis said, don't you dare quote that old lawyer to me," my father snapped, his voice booming. "Do you think you know better than us? That money should have been ours from the start. They skipped us. Do you even understand the insult that is?" His face was red, veins bulging. At his temples, I had seen my father angry before, but never like this. This wasn't anger. This was desperation. My mother reached out, placing a hand over mine. Her touch was cold. "Emma, sweetheart, if you don't sign it over, you'll regret it. We won't protect you when others come after it. You'll be alone." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. For once, I saw them clearly. My parents weren't grieving children mourning their loss. They were predators circling prey. I stood up, my legs shaky but my voice steady. "No, I won't give it to you. Grandma and Grandpa trusted me, and I'm not betraying them." My father's chair scraped loudly as he stood. "Ungrateful girl," he roared. "Do you think you're better than us? You'll regret this." I grabbed my purse, heart pounding, and bolted out the front door. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I ran to my car, started the engine with trembling hands, and drove away as fast as I could. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was flooded with missed calls and texts. "Dad, this isn't over." "Mum, Emma, please be reasonable. Don't ruin this family." "Dad, you'll regret choosing them over us." My hands shook as I locked my door behind me. I sat in the dark, hugging my knees to my chest. I should have been happy, relieved, secure, but instead, I felt hunted. My grandparents had always warned me about my parents' obsession with money, but I never thought it would come to this. That night, I realized two things. My parents didn't see me as their daughter anymore. To them, I was nothing more than $26 million in human form, and they weren't going to stop until they got it. Cracks in the family the following week was a blur of tension. I avoided my parents' calls, but that didn't stop them from finding other ways to reach me. At first, it was subtle texts filled with guilt. "Mum, you're tearing this family apart. Dad, we sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay us." But when guilt didn't work, they moved to pressure. I found out the hard way through my brother, Daniel. "Emma, we need to talk." Daniel's voice was tight when he called. He was 2 years older than me, always the golden child captain of the football team, the one my parents bragged about. At dinner parties, we hadn't been close since high school, but part of me still hoped he'd understand. We met at a cafe downtown. He slid into the seat across from me, already frowning. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean. Mom and Dad told me everything. You're being selfish. That money was meant for the family." I swallowed hard, staring into my coffee. Daniel, Grandpa, and Grandma made their choice. It wasn't mine. I didn't ask for this. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "But you got it. And now you're hoarding it while the rest of us struggle." Do you think it's fair that Mum and Dad, who built this family, get nothing while you of all people get everything? The words stung, of all people. Like I was unworthy, undeserving. I shook my head. It's not about fairness. It's about honoring what they wanted. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You sound just like them. Always taking their side. He stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the tile floor. If you were smart, you'd hand it over before this gets uglier. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just my parents anymore. They had Daniel too. 2 days later, it was my sister, Hannah. She was 20, still in college, and had always come to me for advice. We used to stay up late in my dorm room laughing about boys, classes, and life. She was the one person I thought I could count on, but when she showed up at my apartment, her expression wasn't warm. Emma, she said, arms crossed. Why are you doing this? Mum's crying every night. Dad's furious. You're tearing us apart. I felt tears prick my eyes. Hannah, I don't want to fight, but I can't give them the money. It's not mine to give, it's theirs. Grandma and Grandpa chose me for a reason. She shook her head. No, they chose wrong. You don't even know what to do with it. You're just going to waste it while the rest of us suffer. Mum says, you don't care about us anymore. That's not true, I cried. I love you. But this isn't about me choosing money over family. It's about respect. Why is no one respecting Grandma and Grandpa's wishes? Her lip trembled, but her eyes hardened. Because they were wrong. And if you don't fix this, don't expect me to stand by you. She stormed out before I could respond, leaving me alone again. That night, I sat on my bed surrounded by old photo albums. My grandparents had left them to me, along with the estate. Flipping through the pages, I saw birthdays, Christmas mornings, family vacations, smiling faces, hugs, laughter. But as I looked closer, I noticed something. In most of the pictures, my parents weren't there. It was me with Grandma and Grandpa, me with them at school plays, me at their cabin by the lake. They had been my real family, and maybe that's why they chose me. Still, the realization hurt. My own siblings, Daniel and Hannah, were now turning their backs on me. My parents were poisoning them, twisting everything until I was the villain. The cracks in our family weren't small anymore. They were deep, jagged fractures, spreading like broken glass across every relationship I had ever known. For the first time in my life, I wondered if I even had a family anymore. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. The demands would grow louder, the lies would grow darker, and soon those cracks in the family would shatter into a war I never saw coming. Poisoned words, my parents didn't give up. If anything, my refusal only fueled them. Within a week, my mother called and insisted I come to Sunday dinner. Just family, she said in her sweetest voice. We need to talk calmly. Every instinct in me screamed not to go. But part of me still longed for peace. For the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they would finally accept my choice and move on. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The Carter dining room had always been a place of performance, not comfort. The long oak table polished to a mirror sheen, the silver cutlery glistening under the chandelier, and my mother's carefully curated centerpieces. Everything was meant to impress. But that night, it felt like a stage set for battle. Daniel was already there, scrolling on his phone, his jaw tight. Hannah sat stiffly beside him, eyes darting between me and our parents. My father poured himself a drink without offering anyone else one. My mother, dressed impeccably as always, smiled like a hostess welcoming a guest she secretly despised. Emma, she said warmly, we're so glad you came. Let's have a nice meal together. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation was surface-level classes work, the weather, but I could feel the tension humming under every word. Finally, my mother set down her fork and folded her hands. Her smile vanished. Emma, she said, her tone sharp now, do you understand what you're doing to this family? The room went quiet. I swallowed. I'm not doing anything. I'm just respecting Grandma and Grandpa's wishes. Daniel snorted. That's what you call respect? Keeping all that money while Mum and Dad get nothing? My mother's eyes gleamed with cold fire. Do you know what people are saying? They think you manipulated them, that you twisted their minds to cut us out. My breath caught. That's not true. She leaned forward, her voice rising. You've always been their favorite, Emma. Always. And now you've taken everything from us. Everything we worked for. Everything we deserved. Do you feel proud of yourself? Do you feel good knowing your mother can't sleep at night because of you? Tears burned my eyes, but I fought to keep my voice steady. I didn't take anything. They gave it to me. And if you can't accept that, that's not my fault. Her hand slammed against the table, making the silverware jump. Ungrateful child. After everything we've given you, This is how you repay us." My father finally spoke, his voice cold as stone. "Emma, this is your last chance. Do the right thing. Sign it over. Otherwise, you let the sentence hang." His meaning crystal clear. Hannah looked down, silent. Daniel smirked, enjoying the spectacle. Something inside me cracked from their words, but from the realization that I would never win. No matter what I said, no matter how much I begged for understanding, they would never see me as their daughter again, only as the obstacle between them and the money. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. My hands were shaking, but my voice was firm. "I'm done," my mother sneered, walking away, as always. I turned to her, tears streaming now. "No, I'm walking away because you've made it clear money means more to you than I ever did." The silence that followed was deafening. I left the table, walked out of the house, and slammed the door behind me. That night, my phone exploded again with messages. But this time, they weren't just from my parents. They were from neighbors, family, friends, even distant relatives. "How could you do this to your parents? Your poor mother is devastated. Everyone knows you manipulated them for the money." My mother had poisoned not just our family but my entire community. She was turning the world against me. I dropped my phone onto the couch, my chest heaving. The tears wouldn't stop. My own mother was destroying my reputation, piece by piece. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. It was war, friends, or foes the next morning. I dragged myself out of bed and forced myself to go to work at the coffee shop. The air smelled of espresso and cinnamon rolls, usually comforting but not that day. I could feel the weight of people's stares before I even tied on my apron. That it wasn't paranoia. It was real. Two regulars who always sat in the corner with laptops suddenly stopped talking when I walked past. A woman at the counter whispered something to her friend, both of them glancing at me before smirking. By the time I clocked out, my nerves were raw. When I stepped outside, my best friend Lily was leaning against her car waiting for me. She'd been my anchor since high school, the one person who never judged me, who always had my back. I rushed toward her, relief flooding me. "Lily," I breathed, hugging her tight, but she didn't hug me back. She pulled away, her expression serious. "We need to talk." We sat in her car, the engine off. The silence stretched between us. Finally, she said, "Emma, what's going on with your family? Everyone's talking about it." My stomach twisted. "What are they saying?" "That you manipulated your grandparents into leaving you everything," she said bluntly. "That you cut your parents out. That you're greedy." The word hit like a slap. I shook my head fiercely. "Lily, you know me. You know I would never do that. I didn't ask for any of this. They made their choice, and now my parents are turning everyone against me." Her eyes softened a little, but doubt lingered there. "I want to believe you, but Emma, $26 million, that kind of money changes people. How do I know it hasn't changed you?" Tears stung my eyes. "Because I'm still me. I'm still your friend. I haven't spent a cent of it. I don't even know what to do with it. All I know is my parents want it so badly they've turned my brother and sister against me." Lily looked away, chewing her lip. "Just be careful. Money brings out the worst in people, and if you're not careful, it'll bring out the worst in you too." Her words hung in the air like smoke. For the first time in our friendship, I felt distance between us. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with another message, this time from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey Emma, congrats on the inheritance. Wanna help me start a business?" I stared at the screen, numbed. Then came another. "I heard you're loaded now. Can you loan me $50,000? And another. "Family sticks together. Don't forget who was there for you before you had money." By evening, I had dozens of messages, all asking for money, all pretending to care about me but really circling like vultures. I felt sick. That night, Lily came by again. She sat cross-legged on my couch, studying me carefully. "You know what I think," she said. I looked up from the pile of unopened messages on my phone. "What? That your grandparents knew exactly what they were doing? They saw this coming. That's why they gave it to you, because you're the only one they trusted not to waste it." Her words brought a lump to my throat. "But Emma," she added, "you need to be smart. Protect yourself. If your parents are already spreading lies, this could get dangerous." I hugged her then, relief flooding me that at least one person still believed in me. But even as she held me, I could feel the world closing in, everyone demanding, whispering, judging, and I realized I wasn't just fighting my family anymore. I was fighting everyone, but the worst was yet to come, because soon, it wouldn't just be whispers or demands, that it would be lawyers, and I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen next. The legal threat. The letter came on a Thursday morning, slipped under my apartment door in a thick white envelope stamped with a law firm's crest. At first I thought it was more bank paperwork, but when I tore it open and scanned the bold black letters at the top, my stomach dropped. Notice of intent to contest. Willie sank onto the couch, my hands shaking. The letter was signed by Benson and Harlow, attorneys at law. The client, my father. Read the first lines over and over until the words blurred. Our client, Mr. Robert Carter, intends to challenge the last will and testament of William and Eleanor Carter on the grounds of undue influence and mental incapacity. We request an immediate meeting to discuss settlement options. Undue influence, mental incapacity. They were accusing me of manipulating my grandparents. I called Mr. Davis, my grandparents' lawyer, immediately. His calm, measured voice answered. On the third ring, "Emma, I was expecting this," he said gently. My throat tightened. Expecting it? They're saying I manipulated them, that I took advantage of them, he sighed. Your father has been threatening this since the will was signed. He believes the estate was rightfully his. But Emma, don't panic. Your grandparents were of sound mind when they wrote that will. I made sure of it. They even included additional clauses to prevent exactly this. I clutched the phone. What clauses? A letter of intent, he explained. Your grandmother insisted on writing one. It explains why they chose you as sole heir. It isn't legally binding, but it strengthens our case. When the time comes, I'll share it. A wave of relief and sadness washed over me. Even from the grave, Grandma was still protecting me. That evening, the phone calls started again, this time from numbers I didn't recognize. Reporters, gossip columnists. My parents had leaked the story. Emma Carter, is it true you manipulated your grandparents for their fortune? Are you prepared to face your father in court? Do you have anything to say about your family's accusations? I hung up every time, my chest tight with panic. When I finally turned my phone off, I sat in silence, staring at the wall. I thought inheritance would bring security. Instead, it had brought me a war zone. The next day, I met Mr. Davis at his office. His shelves of law books felt like armor around me, though my nerves still buzzed. He laid out the situation. Emma, your father's case is weak, but weak cases can still be destructive. This won't just be about the will, it'll be about your reputation. They'll dig into your life, your finances, even your relationships, to paint you as untrustworthy. My stomach churned. So what do I do? He handed me a folder thick with documents. We fight. We gather every piece of evidence showing your grandparents' intent. We bring forward witnesses, friends, caretakers, anyone who can attest to their mental clarity, and we hold on to that letter from your grandmother. It will make all the difference. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. Emma, he added, his voice softer now, your grandparents knew this would happen. That's why they were so deliberate. They believed in you. Don't let your parents' greed make you doubt yourself. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of strength. But when I got home that night, I found a note taped to my apartment door in my father's handwriting. Last chance, Emma. Hand it over quietly, or we'll destroy you in court. The words chilled me to the bone. I tore it down, crumpled it in my fist, and whispered to myself the words my grandfather had always said. Strong people don't break. But as I locked my door and slid the chain into place, I couldn't help wondering, how strong was I really? The legal storm had officially begun, and I had no idea just how many secrets it was about to unearth, secrets of the past. The night after I found the threatening note, sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying my father's words, the venom in my mother's accusations, the betrayal in Daniel's and Hannah's eyes. When I finally drifted into uneasy dreams, it was of my grandparents' house, the old study that always smelled of pipe tobacco and cedar, the desk drawers where Grandpa kept everything neatly organized, and Grandma's habit of tucking letters into books for safekeeping. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called Mr. Davis. I need access to their house. I said, there might be something there, something they left for me, he agreed, and by noon I was standing on the porch of the Carter estate. The house felt different without them inside. Too quiet, too hollow. I went straight to the study. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. The mahogany desk sat exactly as I remembered, though a faint layer of dust had settled on its surface. I opened drawer after drawer, ledgers, pens, photographs, but nothing unusual. Then I noticed a small brass key taped to the underside of the desk. My heart skipped. I searched until I found a narrow locked drawer I'd never seen opened before. The key slid in perfectly. With a soft click, it opened. Inside were stacks of envelopes, each labeled in my grandmother's neat cursive handwriting. My breath caught as I pulled one out. The first was addressed to me, "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, it means we are gone. I know the burden you carry must feel heavy, but remember you were chosen not for what you have, but for who you are. We left the fortune to you because we trust you to use it wisely and with compassion. We could not say the same for your parents. They lost their way long ago, blinded by greed and pride. This decision was not easy, but it was necessary. Stand firm, darling girl. You are stronger than you believe." Tears blurred the ink as I clutched the letter to my chest. My grandmother had known. She had foreseen this storm. I opened another envelope, this one addressed to Mr. Davis. Inside were notes detailing conversations she and Grandpa had about the inheritance, documented proof of their intent. But the most shocking discovery came in a third letter, one addressed simply, "For the truth." Inside was a confession. It explained how years ago my father had nearly bankrupted one of Grandpa's companies by gambling with company funds. My grandparents had quietly covered it up to protect the family name, but they never forgot. My mother, meanwhile, had forged my grandmother's signature on documents to access a trust fund once intended for my college tuition. That was when my grandparents realized they couldn't trust either of them with money. As I read the words, my hands trembled. I had suspected greed, but never corruption at this level. They hadn't just left me the fortune out of love. They had done it to protect it and me. I tucked the letters back carefully, then clutched my own to my chest. When I stepped out of the study, I froze. Hannah was standing in the hallway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp, her eyes darting to the letter in my hand. I just wanted to feel close to them," I said quickly, hiding the envelope behind me. Her gaze narrowed. "Mum said you'd try something like this. Digging through their things, looking for excuses to keep the money." "That's not true," I whispered, my heart pounding, but I could see in her eyes. She didn't believe me. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I leaned against the wall, my breath shaking. My grandmother had trusted me with the truth, but now Hannah had seen me in the house. She would run straight to our parents, and when she did, they would twist it just like everything else. Still, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't powerless anymore. For the first time since the will was read, I had proof. Proof of why my grandparents had chosen me. Proof of my parents' lies. The question was, would it be enough to survive what was coming? A house divided the moment Hannah left the Carter estate. I knew trouble was coming. By evening, it arrived. I was sipping lukewarm tea in my apartment when my phone buzzed. It was my father. I hesitated before answering, but something in me needed to hear his voice. "Emma," he said, his tone sharp, almost rehearsed. "Your mother and I know you were snooping in the estate. Hannah saw you. Don't you dare try to manipulate your grandparents' memory to justify your selfishness." I clenched the phone. "I wasn't snooping. I just enough," he snapped. "From this moment on, you are no longer our daughter. If you won't give us what is rightfully ours, then you are dead to us. Do you understand?" The line went dead before I could respond. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. A part of me wanted to scream, another to crumble, but instead, I just felt empty. The next morning, whispers began. At the grocery store, people stared at me, their conversations halting when I walked past. At the library where I volunteered, Mrs. McCarthy avoided eye contact. Finally, I overheard two women at the cafe. Emma Carter, yes, the one who stole from her own parents. I heard she tricked her grandparents into changing the will. Terrible girl after everything her parents did for her. My chest tightened. It was beginning the smear campaign. My parents had poisoned the town against me. By afternoon, Daniel showed up at my apartment. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said, pacing the floor. "Mum says you forged something. Dad says you're trying to ruin us. People at church are talking. Hannah's crying nonstop." I wanted to scream, "They're lying," but instead, I pulled out the letter my grandmother had written to me. "Read this," I whispered, pressing it into his hands. He hesitated, then scanned the pages. His jaw tightened, his eyes flicking back and forth. By the end, he was shaking his head. This can't be real," he muttered. "You could have written this yourself." My heart broke. "Daniel, do you really think I'd fake a letter from Grandma?" He avoided my eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore." Then he left, the door slamming behind him. At night, I sat alone on the couch, the city lights glowing beyond my window. The fortune weighed heavier than ever. I thought of my grandparents' words, "Stand firm, darling girl. You are stronger than you believe." But how could I stand firm when the very people who raised me were destroying me? The next day, the final blow came. I received a letter from our church, politely but firmly requesting that I take a break from community involvement until the matter of the inheritance was resolved. Resolved as if my very existence was now a dispute to be settled. I tore the letter in half, then in half again, my hands trembling with fury. By the end of the week, my world had shrunk to the four walls of my apartment. Friends stopped calling. My job applications went unanswered. Neighbors turned away when I passed. It was exactly what my parents wanted me: isolated, cornered, desperate. But they underestimated me, because in my drawer, safely tucked away, were the letters, the truth, and the truth was stronger than their lies. That night, I pulled out my laptop and began typing. If the town wanted to believe their version of events, I would show them mine. Word for word, I transcribed my grandmother's letters. I scanned her handwriting, her signature, her words. By the time the sun rose, I had prepared a document 40 pages long detailing not only their reasoning but also the history of my parents' misdeeds. That it wasn't just defense anymore, it was offense. If they wanted war, I would give them one. But as I saved the file, a thought struck me. Once I revealed the truth, there would be no going back. My parents' reputation would be ruined. Daniel and Hannah might hate me forever. I closed my laptop slowly, my chest heavy. The inheritance had already divided my family. The question now wasn't whether I could fight back, it was whether I was willing to burn every bridge that still connected me to them. Lines in the sand. The morning air was sharp when I stepped out of my apartment building. I hadn't slept. My mind spun all night with the same question: do I protect them, or do I protect myself? For 26 years, I had lived with the belief that family comes first, that no matter what storms raged outside, home was supposed to be safe. But my parents had burned that belief to ashes, and now, all I had left was the truth and the choice to wield it. I walked into the small-town coffee shop on Main Street. Conversations halted. A few people glanced up, then quickly turned away. I forced myself to keep walking, chin high, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder. The old Emma would have run. The new Emma couldn't afford to dot at a corner table. I opened my laptop and connected to the free Wi-Fi. My finger hovered over the trackpad. The file was ready. The Carter letters, 40 pages of my grandparents' words, scanned documents, and handwritten letters that laid out, in painful detail, why they had entrusted the inheritance to me and not to my parents. I clicked upload. Within minutes, the file was live on a small blog I had created the night before. By the time I left the cafe, 10 people had already viewed it. By evening it would spread. And once it spread, there would be no taking it back. At 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was Hannah. Her voice trembled with rage. How dare you humiliate us like this? Everyone's calling, everyone's talking. Do you realize what you've done? I closed my eyes. I only told the truth. You've destroyed Mum and Dad's reputation, she screamed. Do you know what it's like to have people whispering about your family in the supermarket? You've ruined us. I let the silence hang, then said quietly, they ruined themselves. I just showed people the truth. She sobbed, then spat into the phone. I hope you rot in that big apartment of yours, alone with your blood money. The line clicked dead. 2 hours later, my parents arrived. They didn't knock, they banged. When I opened the door, my father stormed in, his face red. My mother closed behind him. You ungrateful brat, he bellowed. You think you can smear our name? You think you can drag us through the mud and walk away? I stood my ground, even though my legs trembled. I didn't smear your name. I published Grandma's words. People can decide for themselves. My mother's voice was low, venomous. Delete it now or you'll regret it. I shook my head. No. My father stepped closer, towering over me. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me, but instead, he hissed, then you've chosen your side. And don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost. He grabbed my mother's arm, and they stormed out. The slam of the door echoed like a gunshot. That night, the blog hit 5,000 views. By morning, 10,000 day, a local reporter emailed me, asking for an interview. But the attention wasn't all support. My inbox filled with hate mail. Some messages were from strangers calling me greedy. Others were from people I once called friends, telling me they never wanted to see me again. And then, there was the letter slipped under my door. No name, no signature, just one sentence, scrawled in ink. You think you're safe, but you're not. I reported it to the police, but the officer barely looked up from his clipboard. Probably just some prank. You'd be surprised how nasty people get when money's involved. A prank, right? Except the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I walked back home, each step heavier than the last. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt real fear. Not fear of losing family, not fear of losing reputation, but fear for my life. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing screen. My grandparents' words replayed in my head. Stand firm, darling girl. You are stronger than you believe. So I typed again. This time, it wasn't just their letters, it was mine. I wrote about the years of neglect, the way my parents had treated me like a burden. I wrote about their obsession with appearances, their lies, their betrayals. I wrote the story they wanted to bury forever, and when I was finished I hit publish. This wasn't just defense anymore, this was war. But as I sat in the silence of my apartment, the shadows pressing in around me, I couldn't shake the image of that anonymous letter. You think you're safe, but you're not. And for the first time, I wondered if the war I had just started would end with more than just words. Breaking point. The air in the town felt different the next morning, heavier, charged, like the stillness before a storm. I woke up to my phone buzzing, not emails, social media notifications. My blog post had gone viral overnight. Local forums, Facebook groups, even a regional news outlet had picked it up. Everyone knew the Carter's secrets now. When I stepped outside, the whispers followed me. Isn't she the one who exposed her own parents? Shameful, or brave, depending on who you ask. I walked with my head high, but my stomach churned. Every glance, every murmur, reminded me of the line I had crossed. There was no going back. At noon, I got the call. The local church hall, our family's social hub, where my parents had hosted countless dinners and charity events, was holding an emergency community meeting. I didn't have to be told why. By 3 o'clock, I was sitting in the back row of that hall. Wooden chairs creaked. The air smelled of coffee and baked goods, but the tension was bitter. My parents stood at the front, like they always had, polished and poised. My father wore his best suit, my mother her pearl necklace. They looked like royalty addressing their subjects. And then my father spoke. Friends, he began, voice smooth, confident. Our family has been under attack. Lies have been spread. Fabrications. My daughter, he spat the word, has been manipulated into posting untruths to tarnish our good name. We have dedicated our lives to this town, and we will not let slander destroy us. Applause rippled through the hall. Heads nodded, and then silence until I stood. My legs trembled as I walked to the front. The whispers rose, buzzing like hornets. Emma, don't, someone hissed. But I didn't stop. I turned to face the room, my parents glaring behind me. You've all heard their side, I said, my voice steady though my heart pounded. Now you'll hear mine. A murmur spread, uneasy, curious. My grandparents left me letters, not just one or two, but dozens. Letters that explained why they left their inheritance to me. Letters that revealed the truth about the people standing behind me. Gasps. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's hands shook, but she smiled tightly, as if trying to control the narrative with sheer will. I pulled a folded paper from my bag. The room fell silent. This, I said, is my grandmother's handwriting. She wrote, "We have given everything to your parents, and they have squandered it. We trust you, Emma, because you see value in people, not in appearances. You will protect what they would waste." I read the words aloud. Every syllable echoed in the hall. Some people nodded slowly. Others frowned, unsure. Then my father erupted. Lies. Forged. Do you see what she's doing? He roared. She's a bitter, greedy girl, twisting the past to justify stealing from her own family. His voice cracked not with authority, but with desperation, and for the first time, the room seemed to see it. Hannah stood suddenly, her face pale. Stop it, Dad. Stop pretending. The hall went still. She turned toward the crowd, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's true. Emma isn't lying. Grandma told me the same things before she died. She begged me to stand by Emma when this happened, and I didn't. I sided with Mom and Dad because I was scared, but I can't anymore. My mother gasped like she'd been struck. My father's face went purple with fury. The crowd erupted, whispers, shouts, gasps. Some people clapped, others shook their heads. The tidy picture my parents had painted was cracking, right there under the fluorescent lights of the church hall. And then the breaking point came. My father lunged at the podium, slamming his fist down so hard the microphone squealed. Enough, he shouted. This meeting is over. You will not listen to these girls destroy everything we've built. But it was too late. The community wasn't listening to him anymore. They were looking at me, at Hannah, at the letters in my hand, at the truth. By the time I left the hall, the sky was dark with storm clouds. Thunder rumbled low, distant but coming closer. Hannah walked beside me, her face streaked with tears. She grabbed my hand, squeezed it. "I'm sorry," she whispered. For the first time in months, I felt something crack inside me, not pain, not anger, hope, but that hope was short. When we reached my car, the windshield was smashed. Glass glittered like ice across the pavement. On the hood, spray painted in red, were 2 words, "Stay quiet." Hannah gasped. I froze. The storm broke above us, rain pouring down in sheets, and I knew, with a cold certainty, that this was no longer just about inheritance or family feuds. Someone out there wanted me silenced, and they weren't playing games anymore. The rain pounded against the broken windshield like 1,000 tiny fists. My heart raced as I stared at the red letters dripping down the hood of my car. "Stay quiet." Hannah clutched my arm. "Emma, this isn't just Dad losing his temper. Someone did this." Her voice shook, and for once, she wasn't the sister who doubted me, who sided with them. She was scared, and so was I. I called the police, but when the officer arrived, soaked in his raincoat, his expression said it all. "Could have been some kids messing around," he muttered, scribbling on his notepad. "Kids," I snapped. "Does that look like a prank to you?" I pointed at the words, the jagged glass. "This is a threat." He sighed, gave a noncommittal shrug. "We'll file a report, but unless there are witnesses or cameras, not much we can do." I wanted to scream. Not much they could do. Maybe, but I could, because this wasn't random. This was targeted, and I already had a good idea who was behind it. That night, Hannah insisted on staying with me. She made up the couch bed while I paced the living room. "You think it was Dad?" she asked quietly. I stopped pacing. The truth hung heavy in the air. "I don't know," I admitted, "but he's losing control. Hannah, you saw him at the meeting. He's desperate, and desperation makes people dangerous." She bit her lip. Mum looked terrified. I thought of my mother's pearl necklace shaking against her throat, her forced smile. Was she terrified of the truth or of the man standing next to her? At 2 in the morning, I awoke to a noise outside, a scraping sound. I sat up, every nerve on edge. Moving quietly, I crept to the window. Through the sheets of rain, I saw a figure standing in my driveway, hood up still, watching. My blood turned to ice. "Emma," Hannah whispered, coming up behind me. I pointed. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, like a shadow that had crawled out of the storm. And then, as if sensing they'd been seen, they turned and walked away calmly, deliberately disappearing into the dark. The next morning, I made a decision. If someone wanted me quiet, it meant I was getting close to something. Close to the truth my parents feared most. So I went back to the attic. I pulled down every box, every folder, every scrap of paper my grandparents had left. Hannah helped, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting through stacks of letters. Hours passed. The rain outside eased, leaving the house wrapped in damp silence, and then I found it, tucked inside a faded photo album. There was an envelope thicker than the rest. On the front, in my grandmother's looping handwriting, were the words, "For Emma, when you are ready to know everything." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a ledger, old, yellowed, but clear. Columns of numbers, dates, signatures, and names. My father's name appeared again and again, alongside massive withdrawals, debts, and loans that had never been repaid. It was proof. Solid, undeniable proof that my father had drained my grandparents dry, long before they cut him off. And at the very back, tucked in with the ledger, was a small black and white photograph. My father, barely 20, standing with a man I didn't recognize. They were shaking hands in front of a warehouse. On the back of the photo, a note. He promised it was a partnership. But I fear it's more dangerous than that. Before I could process what it meant, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or next time it won't be your car." I froze. Hannah read over my shoulder, her face pale. "This isn't Dad," she whispered. "He wouldn't send messages like that." "No," I agreed slowly. "This is someone else. Someone he's tied to. The man in the photo." That evening, as I sat staring at the ledger, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just about inheritance. My father hadn't just squandered money, he had borrowed from the wrong people, dangerous people. And now, my fight to reveal the truth wasn't just tearing apart my family's reputation, that it was dragging me into the shadow of something far darker. When the knock came at the door, Hannah jumped. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. It wasn't my parents, it wasn't the police, it was the man from the photograph, older now but unmistakable. His face was sharp, eyes like steel, his presence radiating menace. I didn't open the door, but his voice carried through the wood, low and threatening. You're playing with fire. Emma, for your sake, I hope you put it out before it burns. Everything you love. And then, just like the figure in the storm, he walked away, leaving behind silence that felt heavier than the rain. For the first time, I realized this wasn't only a family war anymore, it was survival. And I was officially in over my head. Secrets of the ledger. The ledger sat heavy in my lap, its yellowed pages smelling faintly of mildew and dust. Hannah leaned over my shoulder, her breath uneven as we scanned through the numbers again. This isn't just debt, she whispered. It's laundering, isn't it? Her voice cracked on the last word. I swallowed hard. Yes, and it goes back decades. The names scrawled in my grandmother's neat script weren't just banks or businesses, they were initials, cryptic references, coded entries. But one name repeated often enough to stand out like blood on snow. R. Callahan. The same man in the photograph. I spread the documents across the floor like a puzzle. My father's pattern was clear. Huge withdrawals from my grandparents' accounts, funneled into partnerships with Callahan. When the accounts dried up, my father had turned to loans. When the loans soured, he used threats. And when threats no longer worked, my grandparents cut him off. This is why they changed their will, I realized aloud. They knew. They were trying to protect what little was left. Hannah hugged her knees, her eyes wide. But Emma, if Dad owes someone like Callahan money, then Callahan isn't just a name in a ledger anymore, I finished grimly. He's still here, still watching. That night, sleep didn't come. I lay awake, listening to every creak of the house, every brush of wind against the siding. Hannah eventually drifted off on the couch, clutching a pillow like a lifeline. At 3 a.m. I turned the ledger's final page. A note was tucked in, separate from the accounts. My grandmother's handwriting, shaky but determined. Emma, if you ever read this, it means your father has chosen destruction over family. But the Callahans are worse. Protect yourself. The truth is dangerous, but silence is fatal. Note to my chest, tears stinging my eyes. My grandmother had known. She had seen this coming and left me a warning wrapped inside the very evidence that condemned her son. Morning brought no comfort. As Hannah made coffee, I stood at the window, staring at the street. Every car that passed made my stomach knot. Every shadow looked like the man who had come to my door. Emma, Hannah's voice was small. What do we do? The question I'd been avoiding. We keep going, I said finally. We don't stop until everything's exposed. Dad, the inheritance, Callahan, all of it. Her eyes searched mine, trembling but resolute. Then I'm with you. For the first time in days, I felt less alone. By noon, I was at the county archives. The clerk, a wiry man with glasses, looked irritated when I asked for property records. From the 1980s, going back that far. That's microfilm, he grumbled. I'll wait, I said firmly. Hours later, my eyes blurred from scrolling through reel after reel of faded documents. I found it, a deed, a warehouse property, purchased jointly by Richard Callahan and Daniel Harper, my father, the same warehouse from the photo. But there was more. Attached to the deed was a police incident report, fire damage, suspected arson, no arrests, and a witness statement, redacted but partially legible. It described late-night shipments, unmarked crates, and young men unloading, trucks who never came back the next day. My blood went cold. This wasn't just shady money, this was trafficking. When I left the archives, the gray afternoon felt heavier, suffocating. I called Hannah from the car, my voice shaking as I explained. There was silence on the line before she whispered, Emma, if Dad's tied to this, he's not just guilty of stealing from the family. He's guilty of crimes that could destroy him completely. Not just him, I said. Us too. Anyone who knows. And as if the universe wanted to punctuate my words, I noticed the same black sedan I'd seen 2 nights ago in my rearview mirror. Following. I drove aimlessly for half an hour, testing turns, doubling back. The car stayed behind me. Finally, panic clawing at my chest, I pulled into a crowded grocery store lot. The sedan parked 2 rows away. A man got out, not Callahan, younger, thinner, but his gaze was sharp, predatory, trained on me. I ducked into the store, my hands trembling as I pretended to shop. He followed, never close enough to touch me, but never far enough to forget. When I finally emerged, he was gone. But a note was under my windshield wiper. Your grandmother tried to bury the past, don't dig it back up. That night, Hannah found me pacing again. You can't do this alone, she said firmly. We need help. Real help. I shook my head. The police won't touch this. You saw how they treated the car. If Callahan has influence here and he does, then going to them is suicide. Ben who? She demanded. I looked at the ledger, at the note my grandmother had left me, at the weight of the generations pressing down. Someone outside the family, I whispered. Someone who can't be bought. But even as I said it, I realized, finding such a person was like asking for a miracle, and miracles, in my family, didn't exist. Still, one thing was certain, my grandmother's ledger wasn't just proof of financial betrayal. It was a map, one that pointed directly at the dark legacy my father had built, and the men he had chosen to stand beside, and I was about to follow it, no matter where it led, even if it killed me. The breaking point, the courtroom felt like a battlefield. Marble floors gleamed beneath fluorescent lights, but the air was heavy, tense, suffocating. Rows of benches were filled with townspeople, reporters, and even former friends who had come to witness the Carter family drama unfold. I sat at the defense table with my attorney, Mr. Graves, a sharp-eyed man with a voice as steady as stone. Across from me sat my parents, their lawyer whispering in their ears, their faces masks of determination. My mother wore a pearl necklace I recognized, Grandma's favorite, while my father sat rigid, his jaw clenched tight, that they looked less like parents and more like adversaries preparing for war. The judge entered, and silence fell. The gavel struck once, echoing like a gunshot. Case number 4981, the clerk announced. Carter versus Carter. I swallowed hard. The sound of my own name on opposite sides of the courtroom made me sick. The trial began with my parents, lawyer painting me as an opportunist, a manipulator who had twisted my grandparents' affections in their final years. He accused me of isolating them, of convincing them to rewrite their will under emotional duress. Every word felt like a dagger. I wanted to leap up, to scream the truth, but Mr. Graves squeezed my arm lightly, grounding me. When it was our turn, he rose with calm authority. The evidence will show, he began, that Emma Carter's grandparents deliberately and knowingly left her their estate, not as an impulsive whim, but as a carefully considered decision. Their letters, their records, and their testimony from those who truly knew them will prove beyond doubt that this inheritance was meant for her, not for her parents. The word testimony stirred the crowd. I glanced nervously. Who could possibly speak on my behalf? The first day dragged on, filled with documents, timelines, and bitter exchanges. But it was the second day that shattered the thin shell holding me together. Daniel was called to the stand. On my little brother, the boy who once chased fireflies with me in the summer fields, now sat under oath, avoiding my gaze. Daniel Carter, their lawyer said smoothly, did your sister ever speak to you about convincing your grandparents to cut your parents out of the will? Daniel hesitated. My heart pounded at me. I don't know, he stammered. She spent a lot of time alone with them, more than the rest of us, I guess. It's possible. The courtroom erupted with whispers. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel's words weren't a direct accusation, but they were enough a shadow of doubt cast on my character. When cross-examined, Mr. Graves asked, Daniel, did your grandparents ever tell you directly that they felt coerced? Daniel shook his head. No, they always seemed happy with Emma. That admission gave me a sliver of relief. But the damage had been done. The real breaking point came when Hannah was called. She walked to the stand in her pastel dress, her hair neatly tied back, her eyes glistening with rehearsed tears. Emma, she began, voice trembling. She changed after Grandma and Grandpa started giving her attention. She became secretive, cold. I felt like she wanted to erase us from their lives. She's not the sister I used to know. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Her words weren't just lies, they were daggers dressed as sorrow. Mr. Graves objected, calling it character assassination. But the judge allowed parts of her statement to remain. By the time Hannah stepped down, I was trembling, gripping the edge of the table to stay upright. At recess, I fled to the restroom, locking myself in a stall. My body shook with sobs I could no longer hold back. How could they do this to me? My own brother, my own sister. The fortune wasn't just tearing us apart, it was turning them into strangers. When I finally returned, my parents were watching me, not with guilt or hesitation, but with cold triumph. It was then I realized, they weren't here to seek justice. They weren't here because they believed they'd been wronged. They were here to break me that night. I sat in my apartment with the letters spread out before me. My grandmother's handwriting, her love, her certainty, they were my only anchor. For the first time, doubt crept in. Could I really withstand this storm? Or was I foolish to keep fighting when the entire world seemed against me? I closed my eyes, whispering into the silence, Grandma, Grandpa, please give me strength, because I don't know how much more I can take. And in that fragile moment, I knew the trial wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about survival, and survival came with a price. The third day of the trial dawned gray and heavy, as though the sky itself carried the weight of my family's betrayal. I walked into the courthouse with shoulders squared, but inside, every step felt like I was walking deeper into a storm I might not escape. Mr. Graves greeted me with his usual calm. "Today is crucial, Emma. They've played their hand: emotional appeals, character attacks, half-truths. Now it's our turn to bring forward what will matter most." "What if it's not enough?" I whispered. He looked at me steadily. "Truth always finds a way through the noise, but you have to trust it, and trust yourself." I nodded, though my heart was anything but steady. The courtroom was packed again. The air buzzed with whispers, the kind that sting because you know they're about you. My parents sat across the room, their lawyer shuffling papers, clearly confident. Hannah leaned toward my mother, whispering something, her lips curling in a faint smile. Daniel sat stiffly, his eyes downcast, as if ashamed of the role he'd been forced to play. The judge called the session to order. "Defense may call its next witness." Mr. Graves rose. "The defense calls Dr. Margaret Fielding to the stand." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Dr. Fielding, the family physician who had cared for my grandparents. For over 20 years, she was a calm, composed woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She took her oath and settled into the witness chair, folding her hands gently in her lap. "Dr. Fielding," Mr. Graves began, "you treated both Mr. and Mrs. Carter in the final years of their lives." "Yes, I did." "And during that time, did you observe their relationship with my client, Emma Carter?" Her eyes softened as she looked at me. "Yes, Emma was their constant companion. She brought them to appointments, managed their medication schedules, and often advocated for their comfort. It was clear to me they trusted her deeply." "Did you ever witness any indication that Emma coerced or pressured them into decisions about their estate?" "Absolutely not," Dr. Fielding said firmly. "In fact, the opposite. They often spoke, unprompted, about how they wished to ensure Emma would be cared for after they were gone. They were deeply disappointed in how their children and my parents treated her. They felt Emma had shown them love and respect when others had not." My mother's face flushed red. My father stiffened in his chair, and, Mr. Graves added, "In your professional opinion, were the Carters of sound mind when they made adjustments to their will?" "Yes," she said. "Their mental faculties were sharp until their final days. They knew precisely what they were doing." The courtroom buzzed again. My parents' lawyer sputtered through cross-examination, but Dr. Fielding was unshakable. Her words were stone-solid, immovable. After she stepped down, Mr. Graves brought out the letters, Grandma's handwriting, Grandpa's notes. He read passages aloud. "Emma, you are the light of this family. We trust you more than anyone. When the time comes, what we leave behind will be yours not because you asked, but because you deserve it." The courtroom fell into heavy silence. Even the reporters stopped scribbling for a moment. My chest ached. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to sit tall. Those letters weren't just evidence, they were my grandparents' voices rising from the grave to defend me. The prosecution tried to counter with testimony from neighbors, distant relatives, anyone who could claim they'd seen favoritism or secrecy, but each statement crumbled under cross-examination. That it became clear, slowly but surely, that their case was built on bitterness, not truth. Still, the tension was unbearable. Every recess, I felt my strength faltering. Every glance from Hannah was a knife. Every cold stare from my mother reminded me that win or lose, I had already lost the family I once knew. By the 5th day, the trial drew toward its close. The judge announced, "Both parties will present final arguments tomorrow morning. The jury will then deliberate." That night, I sat by my window, the city lights flickering below, and clutched Grandma's last letter. "Emma, promise me you'll never let the world make you small. You were meant to stand tall, even when it hurts." I whispered her words to myself, like a prayer, because tomorrow the verdict would come, and I needed to be ready for whatever it brought.